Hi folks, it's week 9 and this is going to be your only video for this week. I know I had mentioned that midweek last week you'd have a video talking a little bit about the midterm exam, and I'm sorry but I didn't get to that last week, so just going to talk a little bit about what your midterm is going to be like. It's not like a typical exam, or at least the way that I think of a typical exam, so I'm going to give you some directions for that. And then we're going to talk about how we're going to prepare, you're going to prepare for working on news releases next week. News releases, and I'm not sure if I've said this to this class before, but news releases are really the cornerstone of strategic communication for any organization. So it doesn't have to be a typical public relations type of group. News releases are really it in terms of the best way, or the fundamental way that organizations release information that they have. So we're going to focus on that next week, but you're going to prepare to do that in this week's activity. So I tried to be funny with the memes, so really I do not feel that this is going to be like the Hunger Games, so please know there's levity in there. And in this picture of the guy lying down, so don't worry. So this is what we're up to. We're going to talk about the midterm exam. It is on Canvas, and it's listed as a quiz. That's the only way that Canvas allows us to do any sort of assessment structure to an activity. So it shows up as a quiz. Then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about week 9 activity, and then we're going to look ahead. So it's a lighter week for you because it is a midterm week in our class, and I'm sure you have some midterms that are going on, whether they're projects or tests in your other classes. So this is kind of a lighter week in preparation for starting back next week, and then we'll be looking ahead. Okay, so the midterm exam, and I have it in quotes because really I consider this a learning tool rather than an assessment, memorization. What have you memorized? What have you internalized? Really, what I'm concerned about in this midterm, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it an exam. These are things you'll see in the quiz that I want you to, that you really need to be aware of, that these things will help you do well on your client project overall. There are also things that I hope once you walk away from this semester that you have an understanding of these things. And so it's worth 50 points, which is the same as one of your regular assignments, so it's not overly valued or undervalued. And it does have 22 items. You'll see that as you click in on Canvas. I do want to draw your attention to making sure that you read the directions not only for the overall quiz exam itself, but on each question you really need to make sure that you understand and read the directions carefully. Please do not speed through it. You do not have a time limit. But you really do need to focus on reading directions carefully. So, accessing the exam quiz, the midterm, let's just call it the midterm. There's two ways. One, you can go into Canvas and click on the Assignments tab, and there's a link under Week 9, and it'll say Midterm Exam. The second way is to use the Week 9 module page. There is a link there directly to the midterm. So you can access it either way. It'll take you to the same place. So some information about sort of the parameters. One, you can use any and all resources available to you. So those are your class notes, those are the slides, the videos with narrated, slides, any of the readings, any of the handouts, anything that's available to you from the content that we have in this class. The caveat there is that you're not allowed to work with or collaborate with your classmates or any other individual. No, don't collaborate with anybody, don't talk to anybody. But I want you to use the resources that you have available to you. This is very real world. Sometimes you'll have to be able to solve a problem and you don't necessarily have a person to ask, but you have a bunch of resources and you kind of have to sift through those to figure out the answer. So that's what I'm asking you to do here. As a usual assignment it's going to be due by Sunday, the 12th of March at 11:59 p.m. So it's typical, deadline and time for assignments. If you've got questions as you go or beforehand, please be sure to be in touch with me. Again, this is intended as a learning tool and not a strict assessment, okay? But I do want to know, your answers and your work, which is why I'm asking you to not collaborate with your classmates for the midterm exam, okay? All right, so in turning to the week 9 activity, this is going to prepare us to start talking about news releases next week. You have a fairly extensive reading next week, and I have posted it so that if you have a tough week next week, or if you have other things going on, you can get started on it now. But the thing that I'm asking you to do for next week, before next week, is to review the part from Smith's Chapter 4, which is called Practicing Public Relations. And I want you to review specifically the information about news releases and news. So that starts at the beginning of the chapter on page 89 and goes to about page 106. The news release information is the most important, but it'll give you a refresher on what are some of the other writing-related specifics of public relations work. Then what I'm asking you to do is, in today's module page, there are 4 example news releases that are provided for you. And I want you to, for week 9's activity, choose one of those 4, and in sort of a bulleted list, and I'll show you what that looks like to me, or in my head, when I'm envisioning, I want you to identify these bullet points that Smith includes in Chapter 4. So I want you to identify what is the lead. I want you to identify a benefit statement or the benefit statement. Sometimes there's more than one. Any information action statement. So is there sort of a call to action in the release? Secondary details, so things that are sort of beyond the lead, beyond the main point, but still essential. Any background information that's used in the release. Sometimes this comes in the form of what's called a boilerplate statement. We'll talk about that next week. But any information that talks about what the organization is or does that's pretty standard. Sometimes those things show up on release after release. That's why it's called a boilerplate. It's something that comes on every release. But it's background information about the organization and who and what it is, that kind of thing. And then sometimes there's also separate organizational identification that is much like a boilerplate. The background information can be separate, kind of backtracking here, but the background information can be a little separate, can have background information, help put things in context, and then the organizational identification is usually the boilerplate. So I apologize for that mix-up there. So here's kind of what I envision this looking like. Here is a copy of the news release, and you can see from the hand on the video here that I have linked this. So if you click on this when you're looking at the slides for this, you can get quick access to this news release that I chose to use for the example here. And so you can see I did the lead, benefit statement, each of these bulleted items. And then what I did, just to make sure that you knew what my responses were or my answers, I put those in sort of a light blue. I would ask that you do something like that as well. You designate, here's the lead, sort of as the statement here, and then you somehow show me whether it's bold or a different font size or a different color is pretty easy. Make sure that it's something that's easy for me to read. And then I can see you've identified the lead, you've identified the benefit statement. So make sure that you use Smith's chapter for this, because he talks a little bit about what is a benefit statement, and so that'll help you identify it, okay? And then the second part of this, you're going to have this sort of organization here. You're going to have this twice. You're going to have it for one of the 4 examples that I've provided, and then you're going to find a news release of your own. So something either from your client organization, from an organization or a company that you really like, or that you found something interesting that's up to you. Where you find that news release is up to you. What I want you to do, though, is find those same identify the same elements that are listed. So you're going to do a second lead, benefit statement, and so forth. Okay. When you do that second news release, you need to make sure that you either provide me a link to the release that you've chosen, or save it as a PDF, or somehow include that a copy of it or a link to it with your activity, so that I can pull up the release and that I can look at your responses as well. Okay, so that's your week 9 activity to get you started looking at news releases. As I said, you can choose any news release you want for this second part. It can be from your client organization, or it can be any organization that you're interested in. You can see here from the example that the organizational information on this news release was not included. So you may have a situation where some of this information isn't included. I can tell you almost every release is going to have some sort of lead statement, some sort of benefit statement, some sort of action statement, and some secondary details. Where you might find things lacking are in this background information and organization information or boilerplate section. Okay, so be aware that you're probably going to have responses for almost everything, except maybe, I would even say the background information should be there. Sometimes people don't include organizational information in the release itself. Okay, so that's week 9 activity. In terms of looking ahead, I am well aware that next week is the last week before spring break. We are going to be talking about news releases. Again, this is another PR tactic, and as I said, it's pretty foundational. It's sort of the cornerstone of public relations, strategic communication. So what I've done, because the reading for next week is pretty long, I've also included a link to it in this week's module if you want to get started on it and kind of get a jump on things, if that's available to you. The second thing is we're going to discuss a lot of different things about releases. We're not going to just focus on news releases. They used to be called press releases, but that kind of seems silly nowadays when we don't really actually have any printing presses involved. A lot of them are online. So we're going to talk about the different types of news releases that are not just news. There's feature releases, there's product releases, there's all kinds of different releases. So we'll talk about those and what kinds of information goes into each one and why and all of those details. Okay. Another thing I want to encourage you to do is check out our course outline. Here's a link to the Google Doc, and I'll just pull it over here for a second. So this is the dynamic sort of course calendar. I call it a course outline because it includes everything from, what are the topics that we're working on this week to the readings to assignments. And I just wanted to bring this up because I made some changes in the coming weeks. Moved things around a little bit. Your fact sheet peer workshop initially I think was due this week or next week. And I've moved that to after spring break because I want you to have an opportunity to get some feedback from me before you workshop that a little bit with your peers. So please make sure that you've checked this and that you are kind of seeing what's coming up in the next few weeks. There are some topics that got changed around as well. So just be aware that there have been changes to that. Nothing terribly major, but I just want to be upfront with you about the changes. And then the last thing that I have to share with you is that grading and feedback. I will be completed with all the backed up grading and feedback that I have to give you by the end of this week. So you should receive by 5 o'clock on Friday is the plan, all of my feedback and grades for things that you have submitted to this time. So that includes like weekly activities and assignments and those types of things. So the caveat there is that fact sheets, since they were just turned in last night, will be something that will come back to you next week. Those will not be in that end of this week grading batch. So I just want to give you a heads up about what's coming your way. And as always, encourage you to get in touch with me if you have questions or things are confusing or if you need some assistance. I am here. I will not be in the office on Wednesday of this week, but if you write me an email or need something, I will get back to you as soon as I get back in the office on Thursday. So hope you're having a good week. I am counting down to spring break. You are probably too. So please know that I am aware of that and thinking about it too. So hope you're having a good week and let me know if you have questions.